Okay, we are back with our guest, Nancy Later. For those who are not familiar with her work, Nancy is a well-known radio commentator and internet personality with a global following. She was featured in the 2001 edition of Art Bell's After Dark magazine on predicted pole shifts and appeared several times on the syndicated talk show Coast to Coast, as well as Out There TV. Zeta Talk, which debuted in 1995, has a documented track record for Earth and climate changes, and the Troubled Times site, which Nancy is associated with, is a nonprofit organization that offers a number of solutions for surviving a global cataclysmic event such as a predicted pole shift. This year we are seeing a number of record-breaking climate-related events happening all over the world. If you haven't been following the news, let me just recap some of these events, and I would ask you to bear with me here for just a moment, because this will be leading up to my next question for Nancy. This year started out with a bang when the Caribbean country of Haiti suffered a catastrophic earthquake, so tremendous that it virtually destroyed most of the infrastructure and buildings in the capital of Port-au-Prince. The country is still picking up the pieces from that disaster, while they still await the monetary aid that was promised or pledged in their recovery process. After about a month later, in February of this year, a massive quake occurred along the coast of Chile. This quake was so large that it sent waves reverberating across the Pacific Ocean. Fortunately for the residents of Hawaii, the Pacific Islands, and Japan, the tsunami generated by this South American quake fizzled out before reaching the Pacific coastlines. In April, Brazil suffered its worst floods in nearly 40 decades, with tens of thousands of Brazilians left homeless. The same month, we saw the beginning of the BP Deep Horizon oil well disaster unfold, an event that has been labeled as the worst environmental catastrophe to beset the United States. And although the well has finally been capped and cemented shut, the devastation that has been wrought will affect the lives of people and sea life along the Gulf Coast for possibly decades to come. In May, the city of Nashville and parts of Tennessee suffered the worst flooding in living memory, when a record 20 inches of rain fell in a short time span. The flooding severely damaged or destroyed large swaths of downtown Nashville. Coincidentally, this major climate event was given very little media attention. In June, we began witnessing dozens of huge sinkholes opening up in both Guatemala and in Central America and halfway across the globe in China. These sinkholes occurred without prior warning and for no apparent reason. In July and continuing into this month of August, we are seeing unprecedented long-lasting heat waves across New England and across the southeastern part of the United States. The heat waves extend into Russia and Eastern Europe and across much of the Northern Hemisphere. The wildfires in Russia are so severe that Moscow is blanketed in a heavy toxic smog that is claiming the life of nearly, and this is what is being reported, nearly 700 people each and every day, according to the Guardian magazine. All the while that the Northern Hemisphere bakes in heat and wildfires, the Southern Hemisphere, on the contrary, the countries of Chile, Peru, Brazil, and Argentina are experiencing extreme sub-zero temperatures and snowy conditions. These are also reports out of Bolivia that its river system is experiencing the deaths of millions of fish, turtles, and reptiles as a result of the brutally cold weather. August thus far has been a month of major floods, especially in Pakistan, where thousands have died and millions displaced by a monsoon the likes of which has not been seen in over 8 decades. Here in the United States, the flooding continues in the cities of Des Moines and Ames, Iowa, where torrential rains are causing havoc in the normally quiet and serene Midwestern cities. Now, Nancy, the NOAA is claiming that the first half of 2010 is by far the warmest on record, surpassing that of 2005 in intensity. It seems pretty obvious that the planet is getting warmer and the climate change is becoming more extreme in nature. But what isn't clear is the cause of this and how it appears to be happening all at once and so quickly. Some are saying that many of the climate-related disasters that we are seeing in recent weeks were brought about by the activity of the sun and the influx of solar storms. Is there any credibility in this theory that the sun drives weather, or should we be looking at less obvious reasons for these super events?
It's not due to the sun. As we were discussing in the first half, and this is the hoped-for excuse, was going to be global warming. Then the hoped-for excuse was that the sun is somehow doing this. But, while the northern hemisphere has had heat waves all around, we have in the U.S., Moscow, Europe, etc., the South has had cold extremes in some places in South America, worse than livestock is dying, extreme cold. Well, this is not global warming or gradual warming then, because it means that the globe itself, during our northern summer, is pointed too far to the sun, getting too much sunlight, and the south is getting too little. So this is, again, the influence of Planet X. Likewise with sinkholes, which you were mentioning, this is not really related to the weather, although sometimes they try to say, there was lots of rain and it washed things out. There's a type of limestone rock in places like China and the U.S. and where that happens, karst formation, I think it's called, that when a lot of water runs through it, it does eat away the limestone, and therefore it's fragile and can fall. But the number of sinkholes and the dramatic, huge size is just jaw-dropping. Big ones in Guatemala, a couple of them, and they just look like somebody took a giant peg of the gods and went whoonk. It's a nice round hole. It goes down to where you can't even see the bottom. I guess it isn't bottomless, but nevertheless, holy cow, a whole city block just disappears. And likewise in China, this round structure, and there they are, just a whole school and the yards around it, boom, just down in a hole, for instance. And things like on Highway 24 in Texas, Tennessee, big sinkhole dropping. And there's so many incidences that it's hard to even collect the news articles, and they try to keep them out of the universal news. They try to keep this local so that people do not realize the extent of this issue. This is caused by...
I found it very curious, like I had said to you at the beginning of this, that we had this major flood event that took place in Nashville. And, of course, it did get some media attention. There were a lot of video that was taken by YouTube people and posted on their sites. And so we were able to get it to that extent. But the media refused to continue discussing the situation up in Tennessee, which was a lot different than with Katrina, where we've seen so much of the media come down and do all of these different reports, and it went on for weeks. Whereas up in Nashville, we were hardly hearing anything about it. And a lot of people are saying, what is going on here? This is a major event. This is affected people's lives.
It got on the cover-up list, and there's things that are on, and they gradually get on. Like anyone saying, I saw two suns rising or two suns setting. You'll never hear a mention of that. And they've stopped showing live sunrise and sunsets behind the weatherman, because the weatherman would sometimes turn around and say, holy cow, when the double sunrise or sunset would show up. So that's a no-no. Fireballs screaming in because the debris in the tail of Planet X is in our atmosphere. This increase is just humongous. It used to be like once every, 10 years or something, you'd have a big bolide like that come in. And now it's like every couple of months somewhere. It screams across several provinces or several countries. But, they try to keep it out of the national media The internet, of course, it goes a little viral. You know that they can't control that. That's another no-no. Don't talk about fireballs. Now it's sinkholes. Now it's deluge and floods, obviously, you've just pointed out. Keeping the number of earthquakes and the size of them out. They dumb down the statistics. They take the earthquakes out of the database, and if it's a 7, they make it a 5.2, like that. You know, and you can tell this when they first started doing it, because magnitude is associated not only with the force of the thrust but also by the area affected, and it can be computed. And people would say, I'm telling you, that was not a 5.2, that was a 7. And so after a while, you get inured of that. You know, you get used to being lied to. People's houses will shudder and shake, you know, and they'll say, what was that? And and everybody just says, oh, we can't figure it out. Who knows? Probably your imagination.
And this is something we're hearing a lot about these days, is the shuddering and shaking of people's homes in many locales, not just in the United States, but this is happening all over now, right?
There's a cover-up that goes on, and it's caught at a high level with the media. The media is owned by the power brokers, the wealthy and the powerful, and they will just say, and anyone who refuses to cooperate with this no longer has a job. So you have to have good liars that can follow the list and say, and then it's caught, and it doesn't go out on the national news. It's caught and removed. Oh, this is a no-no. This is a no-no list. So everybody talks about the newscaster's hairstyle, or, you know, the pet puppy that got saved from a drainage hole, and that gets the news, but you don't hear about what's really important. And that's going to continue. Unless somebody who's a broadcaster breaks down and says, you know, we're not supposed to tell you this, but this is what's happening, you know, then, and they can't, because there's a 30-second delay. Someone's hit the switch, you know, all of a sudden, whoops, they have transmission trouble. You will not hear it. So it's up to the internet is a godsend in this regard, because you can get information on the internet, but they don't want anything to be really out there at a national level. They want people dumb up until the end, for all the reasons I mentioned. Pay your taxes, do your job, don't bother the powerful and the wealthy, because they don't want your messy panic, and you don't count. You don't count. Yeah.
Okay, you've been educating the public now for a number of years about your belief, which, of course, others share with you, about Planet X, also known as Nibiru, which is a rogue planet 4 times the size of Earth, which is hovering in our solar system on a journey across the ecliptic. Now, this planet is said to be connected in theory to the reasons for the major events that are now taking place here on this planet. And that ultimately is believed that its passage across the solar system will bring it close enough to us to cause a major pole shift to occur, something that has apparently occurred a number of times in our ancient past. Now, you're still very committed to this understanding that this celestial body will cross our path and that we should be prepared for some disturbing events to occur if we haven't prepared ourselves already. Now, being a self-proclaimed contactee for the alien race called the Zeta Reticuli, are you more convinced about this planet because of your ability to communicate with them and the way in which they have confided in you, or is it more something you strongly feel from within that you may have known for years, even decades, would come about during this time period?
Well, both, but actually there is so much solid physical evidence, so much confirmation. Not, you know, and I mentioned it's showing up on Soho in the stereo ahead and behind images. You know, that its presence is there. Recently, we've had images on the stereo ahead and behind, which are 2 satellites slightly ahead and behind the Earth in their orbits, and they try to see behind the sun what's going on. Venus bloomed. It had this big bubble that formed off of it, and it seemed brighter than it should. And there was also a situation where Jupiter was way too bright in the sky in a photo. And this is known, it's an astrophysics term called blooming, where light is pulled toward a gravity source, and therefore it appears to come from a direction that it's not. Well, in this particular view, Planet X, you know, was near Venus and pulled light, you know, toward it, and therefore it had this bubble appearing off of it. It was blooming light. This is just one of hundreds of pieces of physical evidence that we have, that this body is there, people seeing it, catching it on film. What happens to the magnetosphere, which has no explanation, because the sun can be so quiet as to be in a coma, and the magnetosphere will be twisting all over the place, and on and on. And Zeta Talk accuracy has got another whole list of 100 items that I could rattle off if we had a year to go through it. And I've done some documenting on that to try to demonstrate to people, this is not just my imagination. This is real. It's not even in the database of human understanding what I come out with and say this is Zeta Talk and this is what they say. Then later, mankind comes out and says, oh, we just discovered blah, 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 blah. And it was something that Zeta said 8 years earlier. And so how could I, Nancy, know this and put this down when man hadn't even come up to that conclusion, right? So it's not me, it's them. It's physical. It's a physical thing that is showing up all over the place. Their accuracy is just proven beyond a doubt. And so therefore, I say what they say about what the pole shift is going to entail is going to be true also. Now, then you get into geological history. Every approximately 360 years, something has happened to the globe. The last time was the Jewish Exodus time, where a huge volcano in the middle of the Mediterranean blew up. I think it's on the island of Santorini. The
right.
volcano was known as
correct.
Thera. It was huge, 20 times stronger than Krakatoa, that happened in 1882, which was the biggie in our lifetime, so to speak. Anyway, for some reason, the Egyptians were all discombobulated and let their slaves wander off, the little toddlers and the lame little old ladies and all that. The Red Sea, for some reason, heaved and parted and allowed Moses and his group to go through. And this is all documented not only in the Bible, but also by the Egyptians in the Colburn Bible, which talks about the time of the flood also, which was 3 pole shifts back. So they go into geology, and you can trace back every 3,600 years or so, like when the woolly mammoths died off. Their last die-off was, by best estimates, 3,800 years ago. Well, that's awfully close to 3.6, right? And for some reason, these mammoths are up there on Wrangel Island in the polar circle, frozen solid, and they have green grass and buttercups in their tummy. Now, how did that happen? I mean, the flesh, if they have never melted from the day they froze, they're edible even by the sled dogs, eat them. So what do? Get scared by a mouse and sunder up to the Arctic Circle? Clearly, there was a crustal shift, right, around the time of the Jewish Exodus. Potsdam University has computed that there was a shift in the axis during that time, and we moved south, which is why the Sahara got more desert-like. And according to the Zetas, Greenland was our last North Pole, and that's why it has all that ice up there. So ice ages, wandering poles, all of this geology is explained by the crustal shift that happens during polar shifts. And you can go back in time, approximately 3,600 years ago, all the oceans of the world dropped by 16 to 20 feet, all of them. Where did that water go? Did it vaporize? It obviously, the deep ocean crevasses opened up in some places and pulled it in, for that kind of a drop. And this is a scientific fact, but you don't hear about it. You hear the opposite. Whenever anyone on the media is talking to you about, geological changes, it's millions and millions of years ago, and, this kind, and it's the cover-up. But sometimes on the History Channel, they're getting pretty good about hinting around like crazy and saying this is our past and this is what, more and more facts are being given to people.
I believe
you think it would be Discovery.
Planet X on the History Channel, or Discovery was one of those two.
I don't remember what was said, but I remember that Discovery is too tied into the cover-up, and History Channel tries to tell it to you straight. And I think, I'm not sure just how far they've gone, but they don't go so far. And even look at the movies that we're getting. It's the sun, the movie Knowing, where the sun explodes.
Right.
Even 2012, they didn't say passing planet. It was the sun bombarding the core of the Earth with something, neutrinos or something, and therefore it, heating up and destabilizing the plates, which shifted around. It wasn't a passing planet. And nobody's allowed to say passing planet. They can't say that. That's too close to the truth, and they're abiding by NASA's lie, which is it's all from the sun. And so where are you going to get the truth? Well, we're kind of counting on, in the first place, a lot of UFO displays, a lot of contactees, the Internet, word of mouth, I'm not sure what, but so far, and we had our fingers crossed with Obama, but it sure doesn't look like he's going to step forward either, although the Zetas say that he would be another JFK in a heartbeat if he tried to do that.
We're hearing a lot on the Internet these days about, like you were referring to, with Jupiter and Venus, have increased in brightness so much in the last decade or so. What is driving this increased brightness in these two planets? Is it the Planet X?
Yeah, there's a lot of sunlight bouncing off the dust cloud of Planet X, which is immense. It's huge. The moons stay within 5 million miles of Planet X, but the dust cloud wafts even, what is the sun to the Earth? It's 1 AU, astronomical unit or whatever. Even beyond that, that's how big it is. It's huge, and it blows around and blows out from the North Pole, and so consequently on the SOHO and the like, we see sometimes the moons lining up in like a string of pearls behind each other. And this was caught on film in 2003, and it's on SOHO a lot lately. And they try to get rid of this stuff. They try to quickly edit it out, but they would have to stop the process that people have come to rely on. And then if they took SOHO down and said, the satellite's not working, which they try to do now and then, people would say, cover up. So they keep providing it, and they just ignore, when people say, what's that? They just ignore the question, They say it's an anomaly. Something happened, they make something up, It's Wee Willie Winky doing his thing again. Whatever they want to say, and then the public has to take that as truth, but anyway, it's showing up all the time. And yes, it is. The tail collects sunlight, bouncing around, the blooming effect that I was mentioning, where light is drawn toward a gravity source, and therefore it kind of bends and accumulates, and it so that if you're standing in front of a gravity source and light is coming off the side, it bends towards this gravity source, then you collect it as part of the light that's emitting from you, and you look brighter than you should, just because you're standing near or in the line of sight, to where this light bends very readily. You stand in water, your feet are not below you, they're off to the side somewhere.
Well, there are some that are actually believe that Venus is drawing closer to the Earth, and this is the reason.
Well, I think it is. It's supposed to be crowding. There's going to be drama in this regard, Steve. When the dark twin that I mentioned and Venus are both crowded, they're trapped in front of Planet X. How does that trap work? It's an eddy flow. Coming from the sun is all kinds of like solar wind kind of stuff. It goes around Planet X in its immense gravity field, and it wraps around like the claws of a crab, and encompasses the Earth, Venus, and the dark twin, who keep getting pushed back into this cup or eddy, in between the claws. And as it comes closer and closer, the squeeze is tighter and tighter. Eventually, according to what a lot of mythology has drawn and told us, Venus and the dark twin get close enough that it's pretty dramatic. But this is going into the last weeks, and they eventually jump out of this cup, pop out, and go on their way, just leaving the Earth alone to face Planet X as we approach the time of the pole shift. For instance, the the Hindu gods, they have Shiva, which represents Planet X, the god of renewal and destruction and renewal, or whatever. And of course, that's the pole shift, where the whole world is crushed and changed, and the climates change, and then mankind rebuilds. And Kali is one of his wives, and she's a blue-black color. Well, that is, the dark twin is a solid black. It has no atmosphere, no water. And the only reason we saw it when it came around from behind the sun in early 2004 was because people were seeing a blue-yellow kind of glinting thing in the evening sky just after sundown out west, and that's what we caught on film too. And the Zeta said it reflects blue light when it does reflect at all, but once it got too close to us, reflecting sunlight went off into space somewhere, not toward us. But if you did get any light from it, it would be a bluish, blackish kind of light, and when we have caught it on film, that's what it looks like. So Kali is the dark twin, and the whole mythology is that Kali lives and stands with one foot on her husband, who's Shiva, who is Planet X moving on, and survives. You know, as Shiva dies, she's seen briefly as very large and then disappears. So this is in mythology, and we will. I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to have some real drama from Venus. Yeah.
Okay, there were some very interesting recent photos taken near the sun during early morning or late evening hours that were showing a second sun image, which could very well be the Planet X that you refer to. Now, some of these same images were posted on the YOW USA website, which is attributed to Marshall Masters, who, by the way, is a huge supporter of the Planet X theory and has produced a number of videos and has a radio show dedicated to the science behind Planet X. Now, with regard to these recent photos, it is his understanding that most of them are not really credible because they were taken in parts of the world where it is virtually impossible to view this planet, since it is coming up from below the ecliptic and can only be seen through a lens from the southern hemisphere, where apparently there is a telescope in place on the South Pole observing the incoming movement of this planet. Now, Nancy, he goes on to say that this planet would become obvious to the naked eye sometime late next year, 2011. So, Nancy, would you consider Masters' assessment to be accurate regarding visibility, and what do you make of his questioning the authenticity of these photos?
Yeah, I hear you. I think he gave in to the cover-up. I think he was leaned on. He knows, you know, he's hoping to grab the stage. He's hoping to be the one that can be the Pied Piper and get a lot of attention, you know, and be the one to lead people to understand what's coming and what's going on by cooperating with NASA and the government. He says, I'll buy your storyline that it's not in sight yet, that it's not here yet, and, you know, and then you be nice to me. Well, I'm not sure that they are, you know, but that's what he basically, I think he's too smart not to know that he's lying. It's not from the south. People all over can see it because it's around the sun, near the sun, in our line of sight. And it is true that there are a lot of photos that people take. Everyone's snapping pictures of the sun. It's very rare you get a real, genuine capture. A lot of times they're lens flares or ghosts because the sun can produce a ghost by reflecting off back and forth off of different lenses in either a window, a car window, or in the camera. But there are a lot of genuine captures, and the thing is, it shows up on Soho. It's right there, you know, just slightly, like at the floor, and it showed up during the eclipse, clear as bell. Now, in the south, you see things upside down. You know, I joke around and say people in the North Pole are standing upright, at the South Pole they're hanging by their feet, right? It's upside down, and if you were standing upside down in the room, everything would look upside different to you, too. The moon's face is in a different place in the southern hemisphere. So they had the eclipse down there, Chile and Fiji and those places in the South Seas. And the first thing we had was a live camera, because if in the northern hemisphere it's showing up at about the 4 to 5 o'clock position from the sun, right? That's where its locale is, in the view from the northern hemisphere. In the southern, it would be around 10, 11 o'clock. Well, there was a bump on the sun at about the 10 o'clock position, so they moved the webcam so that you could see everything except that part, you know, on national TV, worldwide live streaming. They had several streaming places that were showing it, the eclipse, because it happened over Fiji or you know, the South Seas, and then rolled towards Chile. Anyway, for an hour ahead of time, they showed you the whole thing. The creep, the moon came from around the 10, 11 o'clock position across the sun. You were allowed to see all of that, the slow creep that took an hour. Then we had the total eclipse. Well, you'd think that they would spend another hour showing you as it crept away, right? But no. The minute, that edge of the sun, which would be 10, 11 o'clock, started to show, blink, every webcam worldwide went down. If you want proof of the cover-up, there it is. But so we didn't see it in webcam, although I saw a light source in that area around 10 o'clock.
So actually, it would have shown had they had not covered it up.
Well, had they not taken the webcam down, you would have seen it, but they took it down before that part of the sun's corona could be seen, where you could see, is there an extra body at 10, 11 o'clock? Because when the sun's glare is covered, you can see that, right? Otherwise, it's lost in the glare of the sun. Well, there were private photos that were taken and did not go down just because the webcams went down. And we got one from Cook Island that dramatically shows a body off the sun, not part of the sun, not a glare of light from that part of the sun at all, because what they call the ring of fire or wedding ring or whatever, like, when the sun glints at the point where that is on the body of the sun. This was off into space outside of that. Clearly, Planet X, beaming, where we would have seen it had they not shut the webcams down. Now, that's not from the southern hemisphere. That's from everywhere. Everywhere on Earth people see this. So the second sun sightings and the like. And he's wrong. And he's either cooperating with a cover-up or stupid, and I don't think he's stupid. So a lot of people are doing this. They hope about a year or two ago, anyone who authored a book and put 2012 in the title was all over. They could sell books, they could get on the media, they could they were just the darlings. We've always said the date is not to be given. It could be before 2012 or after or whatever. There's no magic about December 20. That's a guess. There's no way to line up the Gregorian and Mayan calendars, and to say that that's the date is just wrong. And yet, if you challenge these people, they scuff and brush you aside, but they got a lot of media attention because they went along with the cover-up, and I just frankly have no respect for people that do that.
Well, it was recently reported, you're referring to this all of a sudden there's this emergency to do things. On Coast to Coast, they had a guest on there. I can't recall the person's name, but apparently he was a legitimate member of FEMA, saying that FEMA was making emergency preparedness plans in the St. Louis and Memphis municipalities due to the distinct likelihood of a major earthquake in the New Madrid fault zone at any time, they're saying. Now, the other areas of great concern to that agency were the San Andreas Fault, Mount Rainier in Washington State, and the Yellowstone caldera in Wyoming. Now, we know there hasn't been a major event in Yellowstone in at least 600,000 years, and Rainier hasn't seen any significant volcanic activity since the mid-1800s. And as for the New Madrid fault zone, the last major quake there was nearly 200 years ago in 1811. So why the sudden urgency to set up headquarters in these areas when everything has been relatively quiet in terms of activity?
They know what's coming. They know, and actually the number of people that follow Zeta Talk is just immense. I've gotten email from people over the years. One of them was, it was 7 years ago, and he said, I'm in and out of a major law firm in L.A. that does business for sheiks and movie stars and very wealthy people. And he said, you would be stunned to know how often your name and the name of Zeta Talk comes up around the water cooler. I know who follows me, and they take it seriously. Because of the Zeta Talk accuracy, I don't get the media, I'm not on CNN, because it's too accurate. I'm banned from Coast to Coast lately because it's too accurate. Any idiot can get on there and say any idiotic thing, but not me. And it's a ban because it's too accurate. And people will listen and they put two and two together and they say, holy cow, the ring of truth. And then they get all alarmed and look into it, and then, and they don't want that happening. They want people dumb, compliant, So the truth is very, very suppressed.
Well, what sort of timeline are the Zetas providing in the way of signals or in your communication with them that would provide a clue as to how much time is left to prepare and then lay in wait for this great celestial event to take place?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they won't tell you the date. They won't tell you how much time left. They will tell you a sequence of events. So for those worried about, the West Coast and the New Madrid, the good news is that there is a big clue that we're next. And recently, last November, I got to see a holographic presentation by a very weird-looking alien lady to humans in the audience. And I walked out on stage with her. My role was to make them feel more comfortable with her. So I walked out hand in hand. And although I think her feet were hooves. Anyway. And it was several things that could happen around the globe. And it would constitute a 7 of 10. Now, what a 10 of 10 is during the hour of the pole shift, 9 of 10 is the last weeks, the stress put on the globe then. 8 of 10 we're not even talking about, but 7 of 10 is major plate movement on the following way. Just north of Algeria, the Mediterranean floor will crumble as the African rolls. The plate diving under the Himalayas will tip slightly so that the western part goes down and the eastern part raises a little bit, that curve where the Sumatra quake occurred. Meanwhile, Indonesia pushes under that a little bit, pushing it down so the sea level in all those islands, Sumatra, Java, Malay Peninsula, even the South China, coastline, will find itself flooding, That's another one. And South America would roll the top part of it to the west, rolling over the Caribbean plate, pushing this down further, so the islands just to the north of South America would find they're losing sea level elevation. And then another one was, of course, the New Madrid adjustment, which is going to be horrific and tear all the bridges on the Mississippi, because it'll be an adjustment from Mexico all the way up to Chicago and over to New England. And when that happens, shortly after that, within hours, the Zetas have said, the Atlantic Rift will pull apart to the extent that water rushing into it and then rebounding will follow the Gulf Stream and strike Europe in what they've called the European tsunami, 200 to 300 feet high on the UK coast. Like Spain gets, I think, 30, 40 feet, and Norway like that, and even 100 feet high as it goes into the North Sea toward like the Netherlands and the like. Terrific tsunami. But they have said prior to the New Madrid break, there's going to be major quakes in Japan that will be really Richter 9, magnitude 9, but will be called 8s. And there'll be more than one of them. And when that happens, get ready for the New Madrid. And after the New Madrid goes, then we're going to have the west coast of the U.S. adjusting also on blowing off the volcanoes and the like.
Now, could we be looking for the
Mississippi River? We're not talking about the little...
Right.
Huh?
Could we be looking for the Mississippi River to be flowing backwards as it did in the 1811 quake?
Not until the hour of the pole shift. They haven't predicted that. They've just said that to the west and it'll move toward the south. To the east, it'll move up, and so it's really a skew breaking all these bridges. And the land just to the west will be dropping, so that there'll be more flooding to the west of the Mississippi. They didn't say, and I'm not talking about many states, whether it's 50 miles or whatever, but the Mississippi will therefore broaden in that regard. Yeah. Okay. And I'm sure change its course. That would be the minor part of it.
There are so many things happening today that have a direct impact on our lives, and of course time is moving on too quickly, as has our time on today's segment, Nancy. And as always, it's a pleasure having you on this show, and hopefully we'd like to have the opportunity for you to come back again. So thanks so much for taking the time with us today.
My pleasure always.
And we'll hopefully have you back again.
Thank you much.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.